I want to welcome in Trey Biddy, a favorite of the show here. It's almost a shame South Carolina and Arkansas don't play each other every year
Yeah.
now. For now, because we're going to miss you, man.
Yeah.
After this year. All right, so Trey, I watched a lot of the game with Arkansas Cincinnati this past Saturday. When you're winning like Cincinnati is as a program, and you have a good coach like Luke Fickell, even though you lost some players, you're going to come in prepared. I thought Cincinnati was prepared. I thought Arkansas countered that relatively effectively. Your take on just the overall feeling after the win?
Yeah, I mean, Luke Fickell's won 44 games over the last 4 years. You don't just do that by recruiting crummy quarterbacks and crummy players. The thing that surprised me about Cincinnati the most, I would say, is probably I thought that they would be a decent bit smaller, just kind of like more group of five teams would look against SEC teams. But they were actually a pretty big team. I thought Arkansas and Cincinnati, I didn't think either team played particularly well. Now, we'll see how these teams play out. I mean, Cincinnati, there's a good chance they'll end up 11-1 this season because kind of a one-game schedule for them. With Arkansas, obviously, we're going to find out how good they are throughout the rest of the season, starting with South Carolina on Saturday. I thought KJ Jefferson loosened things up a little bit. Right when they had to go into the 2-minute offense right before half, that's when things, I think, started finally clicking. They came out of the half, scored, fumbled the ball on the next possession after that, and then drove for a field goal after that. So that's kind of where they really got going. I thought where it was really telling, despite all the mistakes that you saw and things of that nature, where it was really telling for me was the last 5:49. South Carolina scored, Arkansas got the ball back, and did not give the ball back over to Cincinnati. Sorry, did not give the ball back over to Cincinnati throughout that 5:49, and that's really, Sam Pitman says that a lot. The best teams are the ones that can run the ball when they have to and stop the run when they have to, and that's ultimately what Arkansas did to close out the game.
You mentioned Trey Knox when we were talking 2 weeks ago, and I remember him as a receiver recruit. He's kind of one of those guys that got too big, I think. Boy, he was impressive Saturday. I thought Rocket Sanders, J.J. Jefferson, Trey Knox. That's kind of the scary trio on that offense right now. What can you say about those guys and how they play?
I'm sorry, what was the other? You said Trey Knox, KJ, and who?
And Rocket Sanders.
Yeah, Rocket.
Raheem.
Yeah. I thought that was Trey Knox's first best game as a Razorback. Now he wasn't so much like growing out of wide receiver as much as they put weight on him. He played about 205 in most of his career. He actually came in last year about 215 and slowly gained weight as they moved him halfway through the season, and now is up to 245 pounds. I thought he looked really good. Had 6 catches, like 70-something yards, 2 touchdowns. One of them was a catch and run where he did a lot of the work on it. The other was a jump pass right over in the low red zone. But Knox has been a good target for KJ. He's got a big catch radius. Obviously, he's a senior. He's been around the program for a long time. I'm still waiting, though, for the rest of the wide receivers to really emerge. Jaden Hazelwood had a touchdown catch. I thought there was one opportunity where Matt Landers was streaking down the field open where KJ could have had him. But I still look for him and Warren Thompson also, those 3 guys to really have maybe breakout games different parts of the season. I still think it's a really good wide receiver core, even though they only had, I think they combined for 107 yards and 1 touchdown out of the 223 passing yards. Raheem Sanders, I thought, ran the ball really well. He's a guy that obviously you guys know from South Carolina recruiting him, was listed as an athlete, probably was going to play wide receiver. Arkansas just liked him at running back and put him there last year. Had a good season as a freshman, and this year I think he looks more like a running back. Developed a really nice stiff arm, hitting the hole well. Now I think it'll be interesting to see, do they get Dominic Johnson back, who goes about 247 pounds, who's missed 27 straight practices, 29 practices in fall camp in the spring due to a knee injury. But he's been practicing the last few weeks, and it's possible they could get him back. I thought A.J. Green ran pretty well, and Rashard DeBinion, also the freshman, did some good things. And then with KJ, again, I thought that he kind of loosened up a little bit midway through the game. Ran the ball extremely well. Obviously, one of the things that stand out to me was when it was 3rd and 9 on Arkansas's last drive, and they had to have it, and they went to KJ, and he picked up 14 yards and kept the chains moving. So that's what KJ Jefferson brings you, that 12th man kind of deal.
Yeah, definitely. You have to be able to stop the run, the quarterback run, if you're South Carolina going into this weekend. Just kind of looking at the injury report. I listened to Sam Pittman's press conference. He actually talked yesterday. Shane Beamer talks today. Uh, a little gamesmanship, I guess. I don't know. Coaches these days aren't. They don't have to be forthcoming about injuries, and they're not. But your level of concern for the Razorbacks as far as their injuries in the secondary, it just seemed like some bad luck, in terms of that particular position, which I think you were talking about that. Hey, they're not that deep back there, and then all of a sudden you got maybe two guys out.
Yeah, Jalen Catalon had a broken hand and a bad shoulder last year that caused him to miss half the season, and he went down on a tackle attempt. It didn't look like he landed on his shoulder exactly or what, but he was not out at practice yesterday. I think there's a good chance that he could possibly miss. Miles Slusher also looked kind of woozy coming off the field. Now, that's, in my opinion, Arkansas's two best defensive backs, both the nickel and the safety, the middle safety. Jalen Catalon is an All-American candidate. He did things as a redshirt freshman statistically that hadn't been done since 2007.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Yeah, so those would be big losses for Arkansas. Now, they have brought in some players. Obviously, Latavius Brini came in from Georgia, who started 12 games for them last year. I think you'll probably see him a lot more. Kari Johnson, who has started for them before in the past, has been cornerback, has also worked some safety. I think you'll probably see them work him in at safety some. And maybe it means moving some guys around here and there. But they do have – safety is probably the deepest area that they've had on the team with Simeon Blair, who's a senior, who's a multi-year starter, and Jaden Johnson, who comes out of the state of Georgia, who played a lot as a true freshman last year and has been starting in their three safety look. So maybe they trim it down and they go more 4-2-5 instead of 3-2-6 this game, just to get what maybe they would perceive as their best players on the field, since they do looks like they are going to be short a couple of safety, a nickel and a safety. And then Isaiah Nichols also went down in the game, but he was back at practice on Monday.
Yeah, Pitman seemed to think he would go in that thing. Okay, Jaden Johnson, there's another South Carolina guy. He was actually committed to the Gamecocks before the coaching transition from West Champ.
He's a good-looking kid.
Yeah, I remember tall and athletic.
Yeah. He's dropped about 25 pounds. He was about 230 playing safety last year, and he's about 205 now.
Wow, lean and mean. That's awesome. So your keys to the game for the Razorbacks this weekend, what do they have to do? They always say you make improvement between week 1 and week 2. I think South Carolina's probably got a longer way to go, just looking at both teams last week. But, what does Arkansas need to do to take care of business Saturday?
Yeah, well, they got to rattle Spencer Rattler. I'm sure you guys have never heard that, huh? Yeah, they got to get to him. They've got to move him around. I think he does a good job throwing outside the pocket, but they need to move him around. The 2 interceptions, I've watched the whole game. Somehow I managed to go through all of Saturday and not see the score of South Carolina and Georgia State. So I was able to watch the game later on ESPN in full without knowing the outcome. So that was pretty cool to be able to do.
Nice.
I thought those 2 interceptions were both, not very good throws. Obviously, the one receiver, I'm not sure he was not very tall, and he overthrew him. The other one, I'm not sure what he was doing, just kind of trying to force it. But Arkansas's got to, I don't mean to use the pun, but they've got to rattle him a little bit. They've got to move him outside the pocket, move this launch point, those types of things. And I would say a big point also is, I always call it the TPS report, turnovers, penalties, and special teams. I think that's true of every single game. And when I look at South Carolina on special teams, wow. I mean, it's so impressive. 2 block punts, a 51-yard field goal, a 53-yard field goal, a successfully executed fake field goal. I thought the onside kick was there. I was a little surprised they were onside kicking and running fake field goals against Georgia State, but still impressive. And that obviously goes back to, his dad, Beamer Ball, scoring. What is that? Scoring 2 or more non-offensive touchdowns, I guess, is the definition of Beamer Ball.
Yeah.
And that comes with that. Obviously, he's got a strong background, in special teams. So it's interesting. These 2 guys, Sam Pittman and Shane Beamer, have crossed paths before. Also, they worked at Georgia together, so they actually lived in the same subdivision. So they should know each other pretty well. But I would say, getting after Rattler and the turnovers, penalties, special teams are all going to be big points of emphasis. And then possibly some injury stuff too. That could obviously play a role. If Arkansas is able to get Jalen Catalon back, that would be pretty big.
Arkansas, I thought, Sam's got 1 year on Shane. He was there 2020, and Shane's 2021. I always thought they're kind of similar hires.
Yeah.
Nobody really, Arkansas hired Sam Pitman, and nobody was really like grading that hire high. But it's a guy that had been there before that has a passion for the school and a passion for the program that's going to go out and hire a good staff. And boy, he did. And you look at the instant improvement. South Carolina last year had to get better as the season went on, but that wasn't during an all SEC pandemic year, and that which was tough on everybody. Then of course Arkansas had the big season last year. What could you say kind of to, the Pittman hire and how, maybe the inside perception in Fayetteville was different than the outside perception, and how the inside is won out in this situation, at least in terms of the progress so far.
Yeah. Well, if you go back and look at my Chad Morris is fired Hog Sports Live show, I basically described the coach that they need as being Sam Pittman without saying Sam Pittman. This is the kind of guy they need, and they ended up getting Sam Pittman. And it's kind of funny because I referenced some of his stuff in recruiting and that too. But I've always been a fan of Pittman, from back covering him when he was offensive line coach at Arkansas. He was just such a strong recruiter. What I felt and what always people would tell me is like, you feel like you know the guy within 5 minutes. And that's very important. That's one reason I think that South Carolina made a really good hire with Shane Beamer. He fits the program. He understands the culture there in Columbia. And in this day and age of transfers and all that stuff, like, I'm not sure like a Bobby Petrino type of character works really well in those scenarios. I think it's a guy that you want to play for. It's hey, I got it wrong the first time. Who do I want to play with? Who do I want to be a part of? And I kind of get the similar vibe. They're two different characters, obviously, but a similar vibe with both of those guys. So with Pittman, now, did I think they would win 9 games last year? That was a little ahead of schedule. I thought that they easily could have won 6 in 2020, though. They had 3 games that were decided by a kick that they lost. But in last year, I think that they surprised a lot of people. And moving forward, I wonder about South Carolina too, JC. Like, are you guys looking at South Carolina like I'm looking at Arkansas and saying, man, compared to past Arkansas teams, really deep across the board? And a lot of that is because of the transfer portal, how they're able just to fill holes here and there. And I wonder that about other teams like South Carolina, because South Carolina had a top 10 class, and obviously, Spencer Rattler. There's some other guys, obviously, that were really key.
Yeah, South Carolina, I thought, did a good job in the portal, and I think that's something that's going to be an advantage that I think when people are kind of looking at teams and breaking them down preseason, it's going to start to matter more.
Yeah,
I think to a certain extent, you sort of look at it, and there were a lot of guys from the portal that played really well for Carolina the other night, and I think that similarly to Arkansas, these guys will come in, and because when you come in, sometimes and Pittman's been there 2 years, his third. Sometimes in your third year, you start losing some of the guys you inherited.
Yeah,
and maybe you under the previous way, you may have reached a little bit in recruiting that first year, and maybe those guys aren't ready because they got to develop. And then year 3, you end up kind of falling back to the pack a little bit. You got to rebuild it again.
Yeah,
I think with the portal, you could avoid that. Largely.
I think for programs, like South Carolina, like Arkansas, I think, as much as maybe we're talking about they've got to have reform and all this stuff, I think the portal NIL is probably good for both programs. And you're right. I look at Arkansas's biggest defensive plays on Saturday. Jordan Dominic, strip sack and recovery, came from Georgia Tech. Landon Jackson, sack, came from LSU. Drew Sanders, sack, played the majority of snaps at linebacker, came from Alabama. Dwight McGlothern, interception on in the first quarter for 51-yard return. Transfer from LSU. I also thought Terry Hampton, inside the Arkansas State transfer on the defensive line, played really well. And the receivers, again, they only counted the 3 receivers that are transfers. One of them's been here for it's his second year here, but those guys only combined for 107 yards. And I still think the best is ahead for those guys. So a huge impact for Arkansas's transfers.
Yeah, I think so. I love the Hampton kid. I thought he was outstanding, and the Pit Boss mentioned him in the press conference. I enjoyed listening to Sam Pitman too, man. I thought that was he doesn't talk that fast, but you can kind of understand what he's saying because of that. It's just kind of like, yeah.
I don't really have to slow I'll usually, when I'm transcribing, slow the recorder down. I have to slow it down much for Sam.
Not for old Sam. Well, hey, Trey, we really appreciate you coming on. And last time you were on, you gave a great overview of Fayetteville for the Gamecock fans going out there. I'm going to repost that this week for all of our fans on thebigspur.com. And certainly can't thank you enough for coming on and talking ball. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And I look forward to having you later in the week on my show.
It'll be a lot of fun. Trey Biddy from Hogs 24/7 in here talking about